We began a discussion in the last chapter about the development of speech. We're going to continue that now using some terms that were a little different from what we used before. So we're going to begin with phonemes. Phonemes are the basic units of in every language. These are the vowels and the consonants that we say in English, and you will come into the world with the capacity to speak speak the sounds of every language. So as an example, unless you're a Spanish speaker, this might be something, or unless you took Spanish when you were very, very young, let's talk about R's for a moment. So the word in Spanish for the conjunction but, I would have gone, but I didn't have time, is P-E-R-O, pero, or pero, more accurately. You sort of flip the R. The sound for the word for dogs, or dogs, is P-E-R-R-O. And that's pronounced as perro, 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 which requires effort on my part to do that because I'm not a native Spanish speaker. Were I to be a native Spanish speaker, that would be effortless for me to roll my R's. So um, uh, we have synapses, those are the connections between one neuron and the next, in which the memories and the ability to perform different actions reside. And I think you might remember from last chapter, the chapter before that, I think I showed you a graphic of brain and neuron development at birth, I think at 2 months, and at 6 months and 2 years. And if you remember that at 6 months, it had a relatively thick number of neuronal connections. But by the time you got to 2 years, some of those connections had gone away, and some had been reinforced and were darker and blacker. And that's because between 6 months and 2 years, you had stopped using some of those sounds because your environment did not reinforce them. And because your environment did not reinforce them, your body and your brain and its economy just deleted those those particular speech sounds in a process called synaptic pruning. Like you prune the bushes in your yard or trim the bushes in your yard. That's synaptic pruning. And so your ability to roll your R always existed, but if you're like most of us, you never used it, and so it's gone away. You can relearn it again, but it's not ever going to be as effortless as it was if when you first begin to do that as a child. Morphemes are the meaning unit of a language. So I play ball. Those are three morphemes. I could say he plays ball. That's also, there'd be three different morphemes. If I said she wants a doll, that's the A is a morpheme. If I said she wants two dolls, the S at the end of the doll is a morpheme. Those each add a separate level of meaning to the sentence that you have. Children are going to go and have longer and longer sentences. So they're basically going to have maybe two or three utterances, like telegraphic speech, and then it's going to be longer. The next part is syntax. Syntax is grammar. So you know that in English there are some ways you can say things that that are correct and some ways that are incorrect. I mean, is it ever correct to begin a sentence with the word me? No, it's not, and you've learned that. So that's what syntax would tell you, is that you have uh, nominative and objective case. So she, he, we, I. You can begin sentences with that, and you have objective case like me, them, her, him. and you learn that those go in different places. And so that's the learning grammar. And then the next level is semantics, and semantics is your book uses your book uses it about making mistakes and applying the rules in forming sentences, and there's some truth in that. And that so when I went and just gave that example of me play ball or something of that sort, that would be semantically incorrect to do that. Or but another aspect of semantics is when you choose language that fits the situation. So if you were going to talk with your friend, and if you were going to apply for a job, and you're speaking to an interviewer, would you speak to those people in the same way? No, you would not. You'd have a different kind of way of speaking, a different language, somewhat more formal, maybe for you a little bit less comfortable, but you would speak to the interviewer for the new job in a way that's very different. That's what's called that's another meaning of semantics. Now, if you were in my face-to-face class at this point, I would ask you, how many of you took English lessons as a child? And there will be some people who would raise their hand, because we have people in this class for whom English is not their first language. And maybe Spanish is their first language, or other languages as well. But for most people in this class, English is your first language. And so you did not take a class in English. You just listened to mommy and daddy and auntie and uncle and older brother and sister. You listened to them speak. You copied them. They reinforced your speech. You would say things, and if they responded to you, that means that what you said made sense to them, and you were more likely to use those same words again in the future. We can also make some speech errors. So an example of the speech errors that we learn is something called overregularization. So overregularization is when you put irregular nouns into the past, or verbs into the past tense incorrectly. So, for instance, if I were to say to you, this is not a regular. Well, it's an irregular noun. So, if I were to say to you, please show me your foots. Well, you would say, you don't say foots, you say feet. So, foot. The regular way in English that you go and you make plural is you simply add s, but that doesn't work for every noun, does it? So if you said, let's go out and see the sheeps in the backyard, that would not work. That's an example, also an example of overregularization, applying the same rule about making something plural into words that it doesn't fit within. Same thing with nouns, verbs, excuse me. So if I were to say to you, I runned home after school, you would say, no, you don't say I runned home, even though for the most part, putting verbs into past tense, just in English, usually typically involves just adding an ed, but it doesn't involve that with all of those. So we make errors along the way. Over and under extension is another one. You can look that up in your book if you're interested in seeing another kind of error that children often make in the process of developing speech. Now, memory. Memory really is about constructing a personal past. And we talk about autobiographical memories. We're talking about a reflection of your life history. So how does this develop? So for children, a lot of this is a past talk conversation in which parents or older people can scaffold a child's autobiography with their memories of themselves. So you probably, when you were children, or those of you who have children, have had your children ask you questions like, what was I like as a baby? And you've probably had conversations about that. And so an example, if you're a toddler, the parents do the remembering. The parents tell you this is what you were like. And if you're like most toddlers or children, when people are talking about that, you delight in that. You delight in hearing your parents tell you this is who you were. This is what happened when you were born. This is what you were like as a little boy or a little girl. These are the things that you used to play with. Actually, most of us as adults still find that, kind of charming when our parents or our grandparents remind us of, I remember when you were a little boy or a little girl and the kinds of toys, the kinds of games you like to play and the kinds of things that you do, and people would laugh and things of that sort. So, and for toddlers, parents do the remembering. But for preschoolers, it's a parent-child partnership in mutual stories. People will remember together about what happened, and parents will help to fill in the blanks with a lot of those. By the time you reach adolescence, the memories become linked together, and it forms for you really your life timeline. This is what my life was like. Some of which you remember yourself explicitly. Others, maybe other pieces of information will be information that somebody else has told you. And because you trust them, you may not remember it accurately. You may not have a lot of strong memories about it, but because someone told you this is the way you were as a little boy or a little girl, it becomes embedded in your memory. So constructing a personal past. Now, this is a fascinating topic to me. I think I began this lecture saying that talking about how you figure out how other people feel and how you learn to lie. So there's something called the theory of the mind, which is when you make sense of what other people think or feel. Does everybody think and feel the way you feel? Can you make the assumption that you bring up any topic and the people that you're talking to will be exactly on the same page that you are? No. Can you have the belief that if you say, this is what I want to have for dinner tonight, that everyone around you is going to say, yes, that's exactly what I want to have too? Maybe, possibly not. So the theory of the mind is about understanding that other people have different perspectives that are different from yours. And typically, this is achieved around 4 or 5 years of age. And one of the ways that we measure that is something called the false belief task. So we have 3 panes here that kind of describe this. So an adult and a young child watch while you hide a toy in a place like a desk drawer. And then the adult leaves the room. And then what you do is you take the toy out and you put it under the bed. And then you ask the child, where will mommy, or whoever the woman's name is, Mrs. X they call her here, where will Mrs. X look for the toy? And because at this point you believe that everyone knows what you know, you will say that Mrs. X will look for the toy underneath the bed. But in reality, will Mrs. X look for the toy underneath the bed? No, because she doesn't understand that's where the toy is. She's going to look for the toy in the drawer. This is called the false belief task. So the idea is that people know different things than what you know. This is when children first learn how to lie. They learn, for instance, when they do something like you've got a chocolate cake that's in the kitchen and they go in and they take a bite of that chocolate cake, and then you say to them, did you take a bite of the chocolate cake? They may say, no, I didn't do that. Now, what can be, not work so well is if they have chocolate cake on their face. But they will attempt, they don't think you know it. So when children have a theory of the mind, they come to understand that the things that they know may be different than the things that you know. And they may use that to help them go and be more successful in their life. So there are 5 stages of theory of the mind tasks. These are the kinds of things that children are going to learn over time, listed from the easiest to the most difficult. So The idea that I don't feel the same, I don't think the way you think, I don't feel the same way you feel, I don't know what you don't know what I know. So the understanding that the reasons why people might want something, desires, may differ from one person to the next. So why do you want to have chocolate? Why do you want to have this toy? The understanding that people can have different beliefs about the same thing or the same situation is a little bit more difficult. So it does everybody want to watch the same thing on television? No, we don't want to watch the same thing on television. We all have different wishes and we have different ideas. The understanding that people may not comprehend or have the knowledge that something is true. The understanding that people can hold false beliefs about the world. And the understanding that people can have hidden emotions, or they may act one way while feeling another way. So, and this is something that most of us have dealt with in our life. So something has happened between ourselves and a friend, and we can tell from looking at the friend that they're unhappy about that, and we say to the friend, "You look unhappy about that," and the friend says, "No, I'm not unhappy at all, I'm fine." Well, do we think to ourselves, I must be wrong? No, we don't think that. We understand, this is the theory of the mind. We understand that they think differently about this, but they're just not choosing to tell me that. So I can think you can see from that that some of the knowledge that you gain from theory of the mind is going to be helpful throughout your entire life. Play is the work of early childhood. Exercise play and rough and tumble play. So exercise play is running and chasing behavior. It's going to exercise physical skills. Rough and tumble play is where you do shoving and wrestling, and typically it's boys who are going to be more likely to be involved in rough and tumble play than girls are. Also, our culture doesn't really support, um, maybe for little girls who are preschool, 3, 4, maybe 5, they might engage in some rough and tumble play. But even then, people tend to look at them and they question why they're doing that. Once they get to be 5 or 6 or 7 and older than that, it's rarely do we see girls engaging in rough and tumble play because it's not so acceptable in our culture for girls to be involved in rough and tumble play. Playing alone and playing together. So pretending is called fantasy play. And this is going to emerge in later infancy, and mothers, as they talk to their children and as they play with their children and with dolls and toys and stuffed animals, and they may have the doll and the toy talk to the baby, they're pretending. And then around the age of 4, there's going to be what's called collaborative pretend play. And this is when you start doing things like playing house, or uh, where someone's the mother and someone's the baby, and this will involve fantasizing with another child, and this can continue actually through much of childhood. And the role of pretending is this: it allows you to practice what you're later going to be as an adult. Now, what's interesting is if you want, and it is that not just human beings do this, but animals do this. So when you see your cat, if you've got a piece of yarn and you're playing with your cat and playing with a piece of yarn and pulling it along, your cat's jumping on it. What your kitten especially, kittens do this more than grown-up cats will do it. But what your kitten is practicing is they're practicing a skill of catching and killing something that they're later going to do. If you go and you're playing with your dog and you have one of those rope toys that your dog can grab onto and shake their head back and forth and things of that sort, your dog is practicing something that maybe they're not, but from an evolutionary perspective, they're practicing grabbing and killing something, which is something that biologically they would do. It also gives us a sense of control, and it furthers our social norm understanding. We begin to practice, what does the mommy do when you play house? What does the daddy do? How do they talk? And some of that will come from your knowledge of watching your own parents. Some of it will come from other people with whom you're playing who will say, no, the mommy does this or the mommy does that.